thanks so much for joining me. Look, you'd have to be under a rock if you hadn't noticed that there's been problems with airlines. Been in the news this week for all the wrong reasons. Flight cancellation after flight cancellation, domestic and international. Some people are being told they can't be put on another plane for more than a week, and their travel plans are ruined, particularly if they're going somewhere in the school holidays with their kids and you're told, oh no, you can't get a plane for another week. Well, you know, that's holiday gone. So I thought we'd catch up with Consumer Protection Commissioner Gary Newcombe to find out exactly what you're entitled to. Good afternoon, Gary.
Hi, Jo. How are you going?
Yeah, great. Look, this has obviously been an absolute nightmare. I know that you've had 193 travel complaints so far this year already, and a lot of them are to do with what people's rights actually are.
Yeah, so, Jo, and of that 193, the bulk of them have been the last couple of months where we have seen the problem sort of exacerbated, and 70% of those complaints are about refunds or credits and people's inability to use them or not getting a refund. So it's very much a hot topic issue, both, domestically and internationally as well.
So what are consumer rights? I remember before COVID, and maybe it's changed, but I remember before COVID I had a flight booked to go to Bali, and I was told by a travel friend of mine that if you wait for the airline to cancel a flight, they have to give you a refund because they've cancelled on you, and that's exactly what happened. Is that still the case?
Yeah. So a couple of things happened. So that is the case, and that was the case before COVID. During COVID, when governments around the world and in Australia introduced restrictions on travel, that effectively overrode a lot of consumer rights because the airlines couldn't take people. They were prevented from taking people. So, but we've moved out of that space now, and we are, whilst COVID is obviously still an issue, most of the travel restrictions have been lifted. So there's a couple of important issues. The first is if you cancel, and this was the point your travel friend was advising about, if you cancel or you miss your flight, basically the responsibility is on you. However, if the airline cancels for reasons outside of their control, so there may be reasons, for reasons within their control. There may be reasons outside their control, like weather or accident or so on. But if it's within their control, and that includes things like staff rostering and availability of aircraft and so on, and they can't provide you with a service in a reasonable time, so a replacement flight within a reasonable time, then that's what we call a major failure, and you actually have an entitlement to a refund. Now, you can accept a voucher or a credit, and airlines will encourage people to take those, and if that's suitable for you, you can certainly choose to take one. But otherwise, you are entitled to a refund of the flight, and that applies now even where the ticket was identified as non-refundable, because that's non-refundable if you change your mind. However, if the reason for the flight not proceeding is within the control of the airline, it doesn't matter that it was a non-refundable flight. They need to offer you a remedy, and as I say, you are entitled to ask for a refund.
Okay, so I'm talking to Gary Newcombe, Commissioner for Consumer Protection. If you want to ask him a question, you can give us a ring on 133 882. Gary, one of the stories we heard earlier this week was a family, I think it was on Monday on the Brecky Show or Gary Show, a family who was supposed to be flying out to Bali. They'd had all their accommodation booked in Bali, and they were told they couldn't get another flight until the 12th of July. Now, obviously under those circumstances, they'd be entitled to a refund from the airline, but what about all the accommodation and everything that they've lost? Can they make some kind of claim for that?
There's the technical sense they possibly could, but they'd really probably have to take legal action if they were looking for compensation from the airline, and it's unlikely. So there's a couple of things here. The airlines are responsible for their service, not all of the related services that you might book. So one of the things we're saying to people at this time, I know it's too late for that family, but is travel insurance is really worth its weight in gold at the moment, because travel insurance will cover you generally, and you need to check what you're actually purchasing, but will generally cover you for all those related costs of accommodation and so on. The airline may well be responsible if, for example, you've travelled to the eastern states and you can't get back or the flight is the next day, they would be liable for providing with accommodation.
Yep.
But all of those really, tragic sort of things that happen that completely disrupt a holiday and so on, the airline is not responsible for those.
So anecdotally, one of the things that I'm hearing is that people are being told by their airlines that if they want a refund, they'll have to do it through travel insurance. But in fact, I'm not talking about accommodation here, I'm just talking about the flight. But in fact, that's the airline putting the cost onto insurance companies when it should be their cost, correct?
Yes, and it's not true. As I say, where the flight is cancelled, it's cancelled for a reason which is within the control of the airline. It is their responsibility, regardless whether that customer has travel insurance or not. So what we are encouraging people that if they're in a dispute over a cancelled flight and either they're trying to get a refund and they're not being given one and they're being told something like that they have to go to travel insurance, or they've been given a voucher and they're having trouble using it, we are encouraging them to come to Consumer Protection. We don't guarantee a result in every case, particularly with international airlines, but we've been pretty successful in negotiating them, and as I say, that advice that the responsibility for a refund rests with travel insurance is actually wrong, and we would deal with the airline over that on behalf of the customer.
Gary, Andumi's called in with a question for you, if you don't mind. Hello, Andumi.
Hi, I just want a quick one. I had a ticket booked with Virgin Airlines, and if the flight was cancelled, we got a credit for that, but it was not the amount I purchased the ticket for. We're not able to use that voucher as yet, and we were told that we can only use it until end of July. Is that possible to get all our money back, or we just need to use the voucher?
So, Andumi, what I would say to you is you should go back to the airline and say that's unacceptable and you want a refund or a voucher for a longer period if that's suitable for you. If they're not prepared to come to the party on that, you should contact us at Consumer Protection, because the answer strictly is no, they're required to provide you with a refund if they've cancelled the flight. And wherever vouchers or credits are provided, we're saying to airlines, you must provide a reasonable period of time, not, in this case, something which is ending in July. So I would say go back to them, say that is unacceptable to you. You either want a full refund or you want a voucher for an extended life. And if you don't get that, come to Consumer Protection and we would take that up on your behalf.
There you go, Andumi. Hello, Andrew.
Hi, good afternoon. Gary, I just want to thank your team. They were absolutely amazing. We battled with an Asian airline for nearly 3 years. They just gave us the runaround. Contacted you guys in less than 4 weeks. We got all our money back. So thank you.
Yeah, look, thanks for that, Andrew. I think, the team last year in particular, this year, worked very hard in terms of negotiating, and we have had some really good outcomes. Obviously, we have a sort of a bit more direct contact with the airlines than people going through general complaint numbers and so on, which is why we do encourage people to come to us. We will do our best. We don't guarantee it, but I know from the figures we've seen that the team has been very good at negotiating outcomes. So thanks for passing it on. It's always good for the team to know that people have appreciated their efforts.
Yeah, it's nice to get a compliment, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, Gary, one of the other things that people have been complaining about is that they might have a credit, or they might, might want to change the booking that they've been told they're going to be put on this flight, and nobody can get through to anybody on the phone. Is there anything Consumer Protection can do to help with that?
Well, again, look, this is a problem, and we've seen this is actually a continuing problem. It was massive last year when COVID was at its height because of the massive disruption and the loss of staff, and that loss of staff has continued through, and so has the disruption. What I would say is if you're not able to get through to the airline or other travel organisation, contact Consumer Protection, and we would look to make contact on your behalf, but including with international airlines, we've had some significant problems which carried forward from last year where airlines that operated out of Perth no longer operate out of Perth. And so getting a voucher is a problem because you've got to go to some other hub. Yeah, you've got to get yourself to Singapore or get yourself to Bangkok or whatever. And again, in that space, we've been quite successful negotiating with the major airlines over that.
Refund.
So if you're struggling, please contact us and we'll do our absolute best on your behalf.
Yeah, got a couple more questions for you, Gary. Hello, Chris.
Sure.
Yeah, hi, I'm Chris. I'm flying next weekend to Melbourne, and I got my flights with Qantas on frequent flyers plus a cash part. Now, if the flight is cancelled for one reason or another, what is a reasonable time for them to give you another flight? And if it's not reasonable, when you're only going away for 3 days, can you get a refund of your frequent flyers and the cash component that you've paid?
Question.
Yes, Chris. So some of the conditions around frequent flyer arrangements are a little complicated, but the basic situation is that you are entitled to a refund of the cost of that flight. So however you have paid for that, you're entitled to a refund. So that would include both the cash component and the frequent flyer component. They could choose, of course, to refund fully cash. That may be something they offer. In terms of what's reasonable in terms of a replacement flight, this is a little bit difficult to say. Yeah, it is. But the reality is, if I would say in your circumstance, it's really within a 24-hour period, and beyond that, we'd be saying that that's a failure to deliver the service for what you wanted. But it does very much depend on individual circumstances. For other people listening, it's difficult to say absolutely. But if you're going for that weekend period, we would be expecting within the next 24 hours that they provide you with an alternative. And if they can't provide you with an alternative within that time frame, we'd be saying then that they should be looking at a refund to you.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. And last one, Karen, you've got a question? Hello, Karen. Are you there?
Oh, hello. How are you today?
Good. What's your question for Gary?
I have a friend and her husband who booked tickets to go to Thailand back before COVID, and the company have given them a credit. So apparently that was all the company offered them. Now to use that credit, so the credit was worth $1,200. So now to use that credit, it's actually going to cost her another $1,200 to use it. So I just wonder where she stands. Like, I'm guessing that they have to pay the amount of money, or is it? I'm not really sure.
Yeah, so Karen, this is one of the problems, of course, with credits, particularly with international flights, and that were given quite some time ago, is that costs have gone up significantly, and the reality is that that's been accepted as the credit. They can come to us. I don't know if this was done directly through the airline or through a travel agency, but I would encourage your friend to contact Consumer Protection. We can see what we can do to negotiate. I can't give you a guarantee that would result in anything other than they actually have to top the voucher up, because that's one of the problems with vouchers. But depending on the airline, we may be able to negotiate something a little better for the person. So get them to give Consumer Protection a call.
Yes, Consumer Protection do such a great job. Just one last question for you, Gary. Is there some benefit, given what's happening with airlines at the moment, is there some benefit in travellers using a travel agent? Does that make this whole process easier?
Look, I would encourage people to use travel agents where they are suitable for a range of reasons. One, not the least of which, is to support the travel agents industry, who really took a hammering, and they don't get paid by the customer. Their payments come from the organisations that they provide ticketing for. So they have a direct line of contact as well, and they can be a very useful source to take on the burden of negotiation away from the consumer. So there certainly can be advantages in using travel agents, but bear in mind the travel agency themselves, in most circumstances, will not have your money, so they can't compensate you.
Yes.
They need to go back to the provider. But as I say, particularly, experienced travel agents have direct connections into their providers and can often negotiate a good outcome for their customer as well.
Gary, as always, a wealth of knowledge. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon.
You're welcome, Jo. Thank you.
That's Gary Newcombe, Commissioner for Consumer Protection. So if the airline cancels your flight and doesn't give you an alternative within a reasonable period, you are entitled to a full cash refund. Keep that in mind, providing it's not a weather reason or something like that. After the break, Carl Langdon with What's on His Mind. I know Carl himself was on hold to an airline, or I think an airline provider or something, for more than an hour this morning, so I'm sure he'll have something to say about that. And Chelsea Stone has been incredibly patient waiting for me with news headlines. Good afternoon, Chelsea.
Good afternoon.